Everybody, Adam Steele from Hot Pole Studios here, and I've been using the Slate Digital virtual mix rack since pretty much it came out and they started doing the monthly subscription thing. They've got a new thing coming out called FG Dynamics. Let's check it out. Hi everyone. Okay, so FG Dynamics is this thing in the middle of Virtual Mix Rack right here. So anyone who's played with an SSL mixing desk before, or even used a plug-in version of it, in the Virtual Mix Rack, you'll see FGS has been here for the longest time. That is the EQ section of a channel strip going down an SSL 4000 series mixing desk. But what we've kind of been missing, in my opinion, for a long time, is the section that really made the SSL 4000 series pretty revolutionary, which is that it had a VCA compressor and a gate on every channel. Now, at the time, it was you just didn't have a compressor and a gate on every single channel built into the mixing desk. That was crazy talk. That's why a lot of outboard gear that you would have had in the early 80s did things like compression and all that kind of stuff, because that was the only real way to do that. You would use the insert loop on the desk after the preamp. That's what you would do. But this revolutionized the way that people were working, because suddenly you could do a lot more. I mean, yes, the desks were expensive, but the functionality was incredible. So I've had a couple of chances to sit down at SSL desks over the years, and I'm very lucky for that. But one of the things that I caught onto straight away is that I used the compressor and gate on every channel. Not very much of it, but my default, I can't remember who I saw doing this, but I had read in one of the magazines that one of the top engineers was doing this, is when they zeroed a desk out, they wouldn't turn off the compressor and the gate. They would leave them at the 0 dB line and then have the range on the gate so that it would actually take a large amount off, because mixing desks of the 70s and early 80s and beyond are noisy. If you've got 48 channels of preamps all going, by the time that noise floor builds up, you get a hiss, and it's quite noticeable in a quiet room on a decent set of monitors, and it can drive you insane. But one thing you can do is have the gate enabled on this desk on every channel. Doesn't have to be at a crazy high level. I mean, a lot of people might have this a lot lower down than that, but 0 dB tends to work for me. And that means that suddenly every channel is silent, which means that if that's going to the tape, you're not adding hiss. If it was coming back from the tape, you're not having the hiss of the tape on the channels where there is no audio currently playing. And that's a really great way to have a much clearer mix straight away, because it means you can do things like you can push the top end on channels using the EQ, and that's not going to then add hiss on the rest of the track, because of course an EQ amplifies when you turn it up, and if there was already hiss there, you're just making it louder. So let's just play a little bit of this track. This is a track where I have added the FG Dynamics on pretty much every channel, generally doing this thing where it's almost nothing. This is the bass track, and this is, let's just find it, the guitar bus, which has slightly different settings, which I'll talk about shortly. But let's listen to this section of the song where it kicks in.
It's your life, speak your mind. You don't know what you'll find. It's too late, now you're gone. All of these promises.
One of the things that is interesting here, I'm going to look at the vocals and pull this up. So it's quite a complicated signal chain on the vocals. But this section here, we can largely ignore. This is just volume adjustment before the ML1 mic modeling from Blackbird Studio and a virtual preamp to go with that. So for this, it sounds great, but we can largely ignore it. Then we've got our FG Dynamics, and then we've got the EQ and a much more aggressive compressor. The threshold, it looks like I've taken a little bit more out on the vocals, but the gate is the thing that I really like. Have a listen to this on the vocals, and you'll notice that in between the words, the gate is not aggressive. It's incredibly gentle. And that's what I want this for. I don't want this to be a really aggressive gate. Although you can do that. This is what I want. I have my release probably set around, 2/3 of a second. So 700 milliseconds. And the range is quite considerable on it. So it's taking loads of noise away. But only in between the lines. So it takes a little bit of the breath away, a little bit of the background noise.
Now you're gone, all of these promises rip right through. You don't want me here, this gravity won't drown us.
And what that's doing, you can see the compressor over there, the distressor is going crazy. The compressor on here isn't doing much. It didn't even light up the 3 dB light. The lights here, by the way, if you've not seen an SSL compression system, the green lights are the gate or the expander showing how much level is being taken, and then the yellow and red lights are how much compression you have. So you'll only see one of those in use at once because of the way that it's either gating or compressing, one or the other. And so I use this to take away some of the in-betweens because I'm using quite heavy compression on this to really bring it to the front of the mix with that modern thick vocal thing. But that also brings with it things like the breaths and the fidgeting in the background. And just by taking them down by 10 or 20 dB, when I'm getting 10 plus dB of compression, means that it's still there. It's just in a more natural level, which means that these kind of sections, like this section of the song, it really kind of breaks down to just a clean guitar and one vocal. And so even though I want that compressed sound, I don't want the extra kind of stuff in between to be uncomfortable. So this just helps with that.
It's your life, speak your mind. You don't know what you'll find. It's too late, now you're gone. All of these promises rip right through. You don't want me here. This gravity won't drown us.
So another one that I've got that on, and this is a really good example. I left this open on purpose. This is one of the background vocals, and there's a lot of background noise in between the vocal lines. Now, without the gate on here, just have a listen to this background headphone noise, which on one channel isn't that much, but it adds up quickly over several channels.
All of these promises. It's a
Now, if I turn the gate on here, with that tiny bit of compression again.
All of these promises.
And there it is, the gate has come on straight away, and there's nothing. And then.
It's gravity won't drown us. This was
So that is why I would have that gate pretty much set like this on every channel, because what that tends to do is, I call it the safety gate. Yes, it is much preferable to have all your edits perfect, absolutely. But when you're tracking or in a kind of a pre-production situation, you don't necessarily have time for that, but you can really clean up a mix and make it much clearer with very little time invested by just having this just set like that. And the compressor, you can see I'm not using it very much, and on all the vocals it is doing a tiny bit of compression on the loud stuff, but it's not even 3 dB, it's not even lighting that light up. So that's kind of a safety compressor there. If we look at the bass, it may be doing a little more. So let's go back to that bass. And this should give us a little bit. So even there, it's not catching the 3 dB light. That bass does sound really distorted. That's a trick that I've found in the context of kind of a pop punk mix really makes it sit. It works.
Rip right through. You don't want me here. This gravity.
So you could hear there that the distortion is kind of magically gone, but somehow the bass fits in the mix better. That's a great trick. The guitar group is probably the best one. This has the knee set to hard, which means that it's a slightly more aggressive compressor. And then we've got a linear release, because usually on the SSL compressor, it kind of breathes on its compressor release, which can be really nice and natural on things like a vocal, but on a really thick bus like a guitar bus, that can be a little much. So what happens here is I've got this clean guitar, you can see behind it, that comes into a heavier guitar, and then that drops out. And with the traditional release, that kind of feels like the volume has suddenly dropped and then kind of fades back in, breathes back in. Feels weird. But with the linear release button ticked, even with the release time set to half a second here, it much more quickly, or it feels like it's much more quickly bringing the volume back. It's not, the time constant hasn't changed, but the release curve has. Listen to this. There we go. So there was no major pumping. The only volume level you will have heard changing was a plugin that I use called Track Spacer, which was being affected by the vocals there, but that's afterwards. And so again, we're not even seeing 3 dB of reduction on these compressors, but each one for me is keeping things in check. Here's one on the overheads that is really helping to keep the overheads in their place. Which is really good for this. There's a section here where the snare goes crazy. And then what's happening here, this is really quite heavy compression on the overheads to take a few dBs out after this LA2A. Without it, the overheads suddenly sit back in the mix. With it, without. It's one of those things where it's keeping. There is this LA2A doing the large amount of the slower optical compression, but this is a VCA compressor that's doing something very different. And it's giving it a tonal quality which is kind of thicker and sits it in the mix and makes so that you can feel the overheads in the mix without having to add tons of high end that just hurts. Because it's one thing just adding level, it's another thing changing the way that it sits, and these two together are doing exactly that. The gate is unusually for me turned off on the overheads, but that's because overheads quite often have really gentle things like ride rolls and that kind of thing, which if I let the gate take them away, suddenly feels really claustrophobic. So the overheads are the exception for me. Another thing that you can do that I've not done here, but you'll have seen on some of these, is that the EQ is quite often a different way round. So sometimes I'll have the EQ here before the compressor, sometimes it's afterwards. On an original SSL desk, there is a button that can send where the EQ and compression go in terms of setting the EQ to make to side chain the compressor and the gate. So you can do things like you can add loads of low end, or you can take loads of low end away before the compressor so that it behaves differently and does more or less pumping as desired. And so we don't need that button in the virtual mix rack, because all we have to do is switch them around like so. And now this EQ will affect the compressor and the gate, or then back the other way around. So we do have that functionality. We just don't need the button. And yeah, it's much more practical for us to just have that, because of course in hardware you can't just pick them up and turn them round. You need a button to be able to change the routing, and that's what they've done here. Is they've gone, hey, we've got that already. There is a mix function, which is great. Personally, I'm not going to use it because the way that I like to use the gate is all or nothing, and the compressor I set usually very gently, but I might need it at some point, and it's good to have options like that. The expander rather than the gate will take the level down a little bit rather than just killing it, which again might be what you need. Personally, I tend to use it as a gate more than anything, but options. It's a really simple plug-in once you get your head around the compression and the gate, but powerful. Simple and powerful, very welcome addition to the virtual mix rack. Thanks, me.
So there you have it. Hope you found this useful. Hope you're going to make use of the new FG Dynamics. I certainly am. You'll see the live mix streams from me. It'll probably crop up there a lot. It might take a little time because I'm always kind of learning how to use what I have and then incorporating new things slowly. But you will see the virtual mix rack time and time again on my mixes. So FG Dynamics is going to make its appearance, I am sure. Thanks everybody for watching. Hit the like button if you found this useful. If you want to subscribe to the channel, that's appreciated. And thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.
Hey everyone, that might be the end of the video, but if you fancy carrying on this conversation, we have a Discord server. Link is in the description. We're also on Patreon, which is something you can really help us with. We also are on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at Hop Hole Studios. See you there.